Okay. So we'll run through the Kitzur. We finished the end of the previous os. So in order to catch up on the Inyan, we'll just run quickly through the Kitzur.
Say the date.
Huh?
The date.
Oh yeah, you're right. So today is Tesayin Other Beis, Tov Shin Samches, Hemshech Ayin Beis, Chelik Aleph, Omud Tov Lamed Daled, Maimah Dibra Maschil, Bayim Hashmini Atzeres Tiyeh Lachem, Tov Reish Ayin Daled. Right? Tov Reish Ayin. Right, so Ukemoi Baveda Kainhu Behabirudim. Just like we saw in Avodas Hashem, so it is in the form of the Biru, which is achieved through the Inyan Ketores, the Biyar V'Shebetam V'Das, Shuinin HaKorbanis, and we saw that the Ika Ha'ava, the Ika Inyan, which was Nilmas Adidei, the Avodas HaKorbanis, was the Avish of Pitan V'Das. And so we saw that that was Mizbader that causes that, Oifen HaAvodah, causes a Bira, the Oyer Pnimi of Noiga. And we saw that that was Veda B'Foil, it was a Inyan Iskafia in the Sitra Achra, not a Bira Atzmi, but a beetle. But there are kafir in the Sitra Achra, but there are Vedas HaKetores, what that's in from Makifim Shivanefesh, Mizbatel Ha'oyer Makif, until even the attic of Klippa, Yeshazel Leveina Zako. And we saw that was the Inyan, that the Leveina was the Inyan of Lavnunias, what that indicated, the Koyach Ha'atzmi, the Inyan HaKlippas, and the Zako that we saw was Mekabel from Malchus Da'asiyah, from Olam Asiyah, which is still the Sefer elements of Kedusha. Well, that's the word Zako. However, we were medactic that the point of the Maimah is that Malchus has in itself the Inyan Pnimi Sheba Malchus, and then there's the Inyan Amakifim, the Inyan Atzmi Sheba Malchus. And in the Klippas, what they go Mil Maila Lamata differently, their take of is Dav Kilamata. So we saw that the Inyan of the Atik the Klippa, which is Sof Ulamas Klippa, that's Makabel from Pnimis Atzmius B'Malchus, and therefore it has in itself a take of Otzum, but that's the Inyan of Atik, how it comes mitzad the Inyan of Malchus to Kedusha, and therefore we call it Leveina Zako. In other words, it's got in itself a certain take of what it's yoinek from the Atzmius of Malchus Da'asiyah. The Hine K'moi Sheyesh Atzilas Bria Yetzira Asiyah B'Kedusha K'moi Kein B'Sitra Achra. U'B'Kedusha Ba'atzilas we saw was the take of Oyer. That was the Ika power of the Inyan HaGilui U'B'Gilui V'Hoilach U'Mismayit. It was not only the taker for Oyer, but it was also a Begolui. But as the Eilamas are Nimshach, Mil Maila Lamata, so the Oyer is Hoilach U'Mismayit in both Inyanim, both in the Inyan of the taker for the Oyer, and in the Inyan of the Gilu. Or Batzila, as we saw, which is the Ike Iskalas Mitzad, the Esesphiras Araya Mitzad Elakus. Then we saw that Esesphiras, and we saw that all the Esesphiras are Meir B'Teikval. Even though Atzilus has got a certain Ika, what that's in a Chochma. And Pnimis, we saw the Pnimis Abba, the Pnimis Atik that we brought in the Hagoah, in the brackets, that there's even a presence, as you might call it, or a certain Iskalas of the Inyan from Atik to Kola Atzilus, Kolinin Atzilus, due to the fact that the Ika Inyan of Atzilus is the Inyan of Chochma, and Mitzad Pnimius Chochma is Atik, Miskale. So therefore, Mitzad Pnimius Inyan of Olam Atzilus is even a Gila of Atik B'Kol Ha'olam, and therefore all the Esesphiras are Meir, each one Begolu or Betekev Shaloi. However, we saw as we go down into Olam HaBriya, which is already the beginning of the Olam HaSanivroim, and we saw the Babriya Rak Mi Bina Datzilus, the Ema, Iloa Mikanana Bekursaya, as the famous Lashon has it. And Kursaya is the union of Kisei Olam HaBriya. That is the union of Gilui, of the Ika Gilui in Briya is from Bina, albeit Bina. And when he says Bina Datzilus, it's brought in considered in many places. That's not Mamish Bina directly, but it's Bina how it's Meya in Malchus Datzilus. The Ika is Bina de Malchus. That's Meya in the union of Briya, and that's the Ika, and therefore we say that the whole of Olam HaBriya is Ema. It's the union of Asoga, Ema Mekanan of Briya, Bekursaya. Ubitzira, Rakzo. And when we say Rakzo, we don't mean that there's only Zo in Yetzirah, but the Ika Gilui of Zo, Bechol Inyone is the union of, the Ika Inyan of Yetzirah. The whole inyan is in for midas, kiyadua. Or basiya, we saw it's malchus. Right, it's brought in sort of a shema azoya or oid mekaymas that you have the inyan from srofim in atzil in briya what they have malachim aliyim oid, and then you have the inyan from chayes in yetzira, and then you have the inyan from oifan in asiya. What an oifan is a inyan of a wheel that's got in itself a certain trace of maki. Of Alchoponim it's a door, Poshut she'ein b'zeh is galus kol kaf senior from Maisa Bilvad. Of a yesh b'zeh inyan shel makif mesuyum, and that makif is what we saw as nimshach and mischaber to the inyan from Artik to Klippa. Of a sitra achre, however, so that's to say how it is. Yeridas v'shtalshelas ha'oyer v'toichef ha'gilui shel ha'oyer ba'elamas de kedusha. However, v'sitra achra we saw that Atzilus de Klippa, but that's the beginning and the high point, as you might call it, Klippa. But that was the union from Chalishus, due to the fact that the kedusha is still maya there, and therefore the Klippas are still Chalishus. And we saw that in Aveda that was Heragisha Abitul. In other words, Bitul Amiti, Bitul Adayin, but it's in from Heragish. Ubedakis, Ushamargish is Abitul, Vaenle Mokim La'achmi. He feels how he's batel, but he can't sort of put himself mitzat Goidel Heragish Abitul. He doesn't have any Mokim La'achmi Klau. And we saw that was already really the Amiti Sinian of the Klippa Keneged Ha Atzilus, because that's a feeling al kaponim of the bittul. Why? The amiti as a bittul, hu she'enu yodeh shabote. So that amiti is a bittul, how it is mitzad atzilus atzmei, mitzad amiti is a bittul, is he doesn't even know that he's bottle. Well, we bought the whole Arichas Benegah to Avraham Avinu, to other people, and the Rebbe even bought the Lashon, im yishalenu odom, ma nishtana shata bottle kach hayoyim shelo yodati do. He would say he doesn't know B'klal what is the kavan. However, what he does already feel the bittul, albeit it's an emes of bittul, he doesn't have mokim le'atzmi, so that's a bittul amiti. But nonetheless, that not having any mokim le'atzmi is due to the inyan ha'ergish. Like we saw that the emes of person in the bracket who's batel b'kol atzmusay, on the contrary, he can have a toiker because he goes purely mitzad the inyanim harayah mitzad kedusha. If ever there's needed a toiker, then he's there b'kol a toiker. Olamata mizeh, we saw shetoiv loy me'abitl. We saw an even lower madrega was where he's as it were zufrieden with the bitl. He has bitl, but he feels it in the even that's toiv loy. Olamata mizeh sheroitze sheyeh nira habitl. Nonetheless, b'kavana l'shem shamayim. In other words, he wants that these bittul should be noticed, but he has a kavanah l'shem shamayim that there'll be a dogma to other people, and it'll be matil a certain ema or derachet so kama v'kama v'chulu, but that's in cheshboinus araya interpretable and learnable l'shem shamayim. Or begases shizo mitzad hayeshes. It's possible. Begases, he feels the bittul and he's pleased with the bittul. Because of his own yeshus. And therefore we saw Briya, who yeshus, that's all the inyan from Klippa, how it is, connected to Atzilus. We didn't say it's in Atzilus, but it's able to be Meya, Milmata Lamaila, I'm sorry, not Meir, it's held to be Mastir, Keneged HaAtzila. Bria, the clipper which is Meir, Mamish, or rather, once again, Mastir, Klappe, the Indian from Bria, and that's Jesus Mamish. Yep, Indian from Jesus Mamish, or Boelas, Ba'atzilas, yeah, Rach Zayin Tatoinim, or Bria Chachmo Bina, or Biatzira Keser, or Biatzia Atik the clipper. So we saw that as we go down, so we saw that in the Indian from Atzilas, it's only the Indian of how do you call it, Zayin Tatoinim, of the Malchus the Kedusha, how it's Nitvas in the Indian of the Indian Atzilas the Klippa, and in Bria we saw was Indian from Chochma or Bina already. In other words, that's a higher and a more troublesome form of the Indian Klippa. Well, that's an interesting deal, because Chachomim Heimaloho Horeya, even though it wasn't brought in the Maimah, but that's one from the Tikdukim Bezer, the Dafki where you have Chochma Beklippa, that's a Indian kosher Yoisa, because a halse fraganze Balshita, and a whole Baldeya, and a ganze Indian, and that can be Mailam Umas here, because Sof it brings to in a Hippo HaKedusha, Chachomim Heima, Horeya, or as it's brought down, in some places in Siddur that call gay Shoita, that he feels himself a Chacham, and he's pleased that he's blown up with his Chachma. That's really an initial stuz. It's really a Hepech in a Chachma. Or we can maybe interpret it like the Alter Rebbe brings in Perek Ches, the Indian from the Chachma's Chitzenias. So of course, therein it brings the Hepech HaKedusha and Hepech HaBittul, as he brings over there in Perek Ches. Or Biyatzira, it's a initial Kes, it's already a in from Klippa Abe Yoter. And then we saw that in Asiya, Davki the in from Atik of the Klippas. In other words, right at the bottom of the Elemes HaKlippas, there is the Teikef HaKigodel, and that's Hepech, they say it in Kedusha, because in Kedusha, Masha Yoter Teikef is Lamaila, and Biyarida Lamata, that's a in from Miut, and in the Klippas is Lahepech. The time for Shibas HaTova, what is the reason and what you might call the time is like the giving to understand, and Sibba on higher levels is more the union of a distant reason. Adova.
The Tanya in Perek Lamed Zayin, it brings the Benoni is shaykh to tikkun of sechel, because the sechel didn't go through a shvira. And here we're saying that there's a...
that's interesting. First of all, if you look carefully in Perek Ches, he writes over there that it was only Bachorayim the Chochma the Klippa. That the Ike Shvira, the brought about the Indian from the Chochma's Chitzenias, was the Pinus Achorayim the Chochma the Klippa. So the Moichim didn't fall in the Shvira. The whole Kiddush of Perek Ches is that in the Achorayim, in the Chitzenias, there was a Yerida. That Chitzenias was made for the Herlam Apri. If you look carefully, you'll see that what he writes in Perek Lamed Zayin is slightly different in it. What he writes over there is that the Iki Yanik is from the Midas. The Iki Yanik is from the Midas, and not from where the Ina from Moichen HaMeir, mitzad the Kedusha. Over here we're talking about the Moichen, how they fell mitzad the Nafila into Elam HaPriyim. And that's what he says in Perek Ches Mufurim. That there was a Nafila, but it was only in the Chitzenias. The time of Sibas HaDova hu mipnei shebesitra the Kedusha hu b'chinas ayin ubitol. In other words, that the whole time of the whole Indian, in why it is that the two Sadorim and the two Oifen HaOilam is Mamish Hafuch, one from the other, that in Kedusha it's Kol Mashal Amayla. Then in Yonah is Kol Mashal Amayla. In Yoni is the union of Teikef HaGiloi. Amamera Teikef HaBittel will soon say that the whole union of Bittel is like a Sgula or Al Kaponim Nasina Smokim to the union from Giloi. Where does Bittel so that they can be Giloi? So the difference between the two Sedorim, that in Kiddush it's Milmaila Lamata, and in the Klippas it's Milmaila Lamata, the Teicher, and in Kiddush Milmaila Lamata, the Inyan of the Etzem Gilui. Even though in Klippa the Gilui becomes less, over the Teicher becomes more, and in Kedusha, where the Gilui becomes less and the Teikif is less. So the Rebbe said that the time of Sibus Abdova is the Inyan HaBittul, that the whole key and the whole, as it were, Mafteach HaSforah, HaMafteach, Sforah HaMafteach, L'Kol HaInyan is the Inyan of Bittul, that Kedusha, who beginnest Ayin, who Bittul. It's well known that two Inyanim in Bittul, one is, like we saw, the Bittul Amiti is a mensch he doesn't even know he's bottle. Yeah, the Bittul Amiti is there's not even any Heragish of Bittul, that's called Ayin. Well, Bittul is where Al Chaponim you've got something to be Mavatel, and that's Mavur in Jewish Chassidut, that the Musag Bittul per se is only Shaykh where there's something to be Mavatel, where there's still Inyanim of Yeshus and Matthias V'chulu. That is an aved of a Bittul. The Vatel of Ayin is more a Bittul Amiti, where the Bittul is Meir Bapinimias, and that's what we saw when I get to the Emser, Heritage of Bittul, Mitzad how it's Meir, Mitzad the Inyan HaKiddush is that he doesn't even feel that he's Batel. So therefore that's more the Inyan from Ayin. It's Ayin Bittul, Oba Madreges, or Elyenes, Sheshom HaBittul Yeiser. In other words, Madreges Elyenes means in the Oylamas or Elyenim, what they're the Inyan from Bittul is B'Yeiser, Meir Shom HaOyer V'Ha'Gilui B'Yeiser. And like we saw, that's in two Inyanim. First of all, it's in the Toikev, the Etzem Choska of the Oyer is much greater, and then we saw it's his Galas, but it's also in Oyven of Gilui Ela Makabim. V'zehu the Ba'atzilas who beginnest Toikev HaOyer V'Ha'Gilui. Not just the Inyan from Oyer, but Toikev, a Inyan from Oyer B'Choska, Lafisha HaKeilim Da'atzilas, Heim beginnest Tachlis HaBittul B'Oyerein. So that the Inyan from Keilim, how they are in Olam HaTzilas, are the Inyan from Tachlis HaBittul, and since their Inyan is Bittul, therefore the Oyer is able to be Meir Al Yadayim, B'Kol HaTeichu B'Kol HaShleimus. And I brought down that the Pnimius HaKeilim is Mamis, the Inyan from Gilui Pnimius HaOyer, that the Keilim is so botil that Inyanim is only the Inyan of Gilui HaOyer, B'Kol HaShleimus of the Oyer, B'li Helem. That they're so bottled that the whole Inyan is only to be Mekara the Oyer Mitzad Pnimiusay. Like we had earlier, we put down the Shitta from the from the Mareches. If you remember, we had in an earlier Maimon, we brought down the Mareches, that he learns that the whole Inyan from the Kelim is not really Beged of Matthias B'Klav in Atzilus. No, the whole Inyan from Kelim is only, Koyach HaGilui Azar. In other words, the Bechina of the Oyer, that it's Yoyer Dumi or Mizkale, but you can't really talk about a Matthias or Kelim per se. Remember, we had the whole Inyan, Shem HaMareches. Whatever we say, however we learn it, the Kelim are not a Begeda from Matthias. The Kelim are what you might call the Koyach HaGilui, to bring the Oyer in an Oifen from your reader to the Makabli. And it should be able to be Mishtausen in such a way that it'll be the Sokos of Meir and Oyer must be as well known. That the Oyer Mitzad Atzmei is not in Oifen from your reader for Gilui. The Oyer Mitzad Atzmei is in a state of Aliyah, he is colorless in the Moyer. And B'vadai the Oyer how is Shaykh even to Atzilas is Boivim Kozer. And the Chiddush is that even to a certain extent the Kelim are also Boivim Kozer. But Tzokos of the Kelim are another Inyan in the Choylet of the Ein Sof. What Inyanim is, the Tzokos of the should be the Inyan of Agilui to the Makabel. There has to be a Yerida of a Ishtaushalis in the Spheres Gufa, in the Spheres Atzma. That Inyan of Yerida of Agilui, that's Nifar Alida, what we call Kelim. Or we haven't really got a Matzias per se of Kelim, what in Yonim is Mamish. Lahagbil, Lahalim, that we have in the Olamas Bria Yetiraviyah Asiya, and you can't really say that the Kelim and Atzilas in Yonim is Lahalim. in Yonim is different Toifanim in the Toike of Hagilui Lefi the Kavona or Isha Haya Adarage, or it be Mitzat Moichin or Mitzat Dini for Chesed or Gvura Vachulu. Alles in Dini van Kelim Adaya natuurlijk. En beklaar de Klolis Indian of Elam Atzilus is still een van Aliyah, not een van Yerida. And ever the whole Indian of Atzilus being Yerid and eventually becoming through Malchus a Mokia, like Elam Bihar, it is a Chiddush. Because Kol Inyone is meer niet wie de Indian van Aliyah, wie is Kalulus in the Ein Seif Afil. Excuse me, met de Kelim. And therefore the Kelim are Betachas Abitl. So here we see, it's like Adova Vehipuche, Davki, because the Kelim are in as Abitl, so of course they're able to be Mekala Dior. In other words, that since the Etaina, that they don't have any Matthias, Davki Al Yodom, we can be poiled the Inif and the Gileoyer. And remember, that's like we saw when he get to the mensch, what he doesn't, we saw in Avedis Indian in the previous Os, the mensch, what he doesn't feel, the Indian Abitl, he's not even aware that he's Botel. He doesn't really realize that he's got a tough kid. And nonetheless, he does have a tough kid. And we saw the tough kid, Darakoi, you can have all the slavers Hayinyonim. The Taki, when it's necessary, he can have a taker. Well, the taker is not his taker, doesn't mean that the meat is a giveaway. Doesn't mean that the meat is a kavana. And remember, the same in Atzilus, the Kelim are not really Amatiyas, but they're Magbil and Mailim. And therefore they bring something down. While those are the kavana, those are the emerson kavana, they're in a state of beetle amiti. Like Avi, I say more than what the Eiris are, as you might say it, to use an expression, and therefore they can bring the Eiris. They're able to bring the Eiris down, but not because they're really a Matthias Amalemet or Matthias Amakbila, like it's put down in many places. But the whole Yim from the Kelim in Atzilus is only the Yim from Koyach, or how they call it, the ability to be Magbil, what we call the Koyach HaMagbil, of not the Yim from Akbala Mami. So the whole Yim from Akbala only begins in Oilmas Priya Yitzirabah Asiyah. And therefore, really, the Kelim are ain't safe like Gilui Shalehem. Can't do it. Edifan, says the Rebbe, the Ein Bepinas Tachlis Habitl, Liyesh the Klolos Indian Atzilos, who Masha Kolula Daim Beir ain't safe Barachu. Akamasha Kosa Bemoki Macha, Beinian Atahu Hashem Levadecha. So we say in davening, in the Vayevorik David, we say Atu Hashem Levadecha. And then we say Atu Asisa as a Shamayim, as a Oretz, as a Yom, as Kol Hashabam. But Atu Havaya Levadecha, or that means the Indian of Atzilus. So Atu Hashem Levadecha means there's nothing else apart from you. Well, there's nothing else apart from you. There's the Sfiras, mit his Kalus, mit Kelim, mit Afila Heicholos Ba'atzilus. But I got to do, where the Pshat? Atu Hashem Levadecha. Like we said, the whole Inif and Atzilus is still the beetle and the Aliyah into the Inif and Ein Seif and more Inif and Aliyah is colorless in the Ma'atzil rather than the Inif and Yerida. And it's called Atu Hashem Levadecha. There's nothing else apart from you. And that's Atzilus. That's a Chiddush Gadol. Okay, Gama Kelim Datzilus, Hein Bechinas Beetle, Kemoi, Vis Kalus Bim Koiro. And we said, this is Kilo Ador Hipuche. Yeah, if Kelim in a state of his Kalus Bim Koiro, then what do they do? He's a Tafkid Yesh Layer. Well, the whole in is that Gabi the Oiro is there more of a Inif from Gilui HaKavana, from Gilui HaTafkid, as you might say, more than what the Oiros are. And therefore they somehow or another, a poil in the air, a tnua from Yerida, l'cholapochus klapei the Sfira Haba. And they go the next step down is a state of Asia Shuinian Shalis Kalas. But the Klolos in von Elam Atzilas doesn't know from anything. It's a Yinifin Ishkalas B'toich HaMokeh. I mean, that's a very fascinating idea. That the whole Yinifin Atzilas is Kiyadua, it's this famous paradox idea. The Mitzad Echad is Atu Havayla V'Del, it's all Aliyah V'Bitl is colorless. Mitzad Hasheni, it's the Memutza through the immediate is colorless in the Mokeh, in the Ein Seif, Mamish, and the beginning Al Chaponim of Efsheli Samatiyas with the Zolam Abriya. The bridge between that is the Indian of Atzila. But it's all how they call B'derech Nes or B'derech Chesed, the whole Indian of these colors, because even the Kalim are not really Ayin from Dover HaMagbi or anything that was really Beget a Matziyah. And therefore, even the Kalim, and therefore said the Rebbe, Dafki Mitzada, Ochim Ba'atzilas, Ma'ir Gilei Rav, Me'ir in Tzei Baruch, and the father is a Gilei Rav. In other words, the Ike is the immediate senior from Ein Tzei Baruch, and that's what's written, that's what, how do you call it? That's the square of an Atzilus. Ein Tzei Baruch, Ein Hagbala Vein, Ein Mokim Klal, Ein in Shaldova, that would feel itself to be anything together of a Matziyah. That's all due to the fact that it's Bittul, these colors in Ein Tzei, they're in from Bittul. Uba Bria. However, once you move into the union from Bria Yesh Mi'ayin, She'ena Bittul K'moi Ba'atzilas, however Gilui Shom B'finas Miyud. Therefore, the Gilui of the Ein Seif is mamish already in a form of Miyud, even though, how do you say, Halavayas are Miyud, this is another Bria. But Gabi Atzilas, it's already Ein Shom. Yes, Shom Miyud. Why? Because there's already a Nasinus Mokim that there should be Zolcha Nivroim, as they will, let's say, the Srofim. But they want to go out, they want to go into that same Bittul via Natzil. That's what they really want, and in a way, that's what they really have. That's why they're Srofim. Of Al there's something to be Nisraf, something is being burned. If there's already a certain Geder of Matziyah, the famous Pisco, and the Baal Shem Tov, what he said, B'mokim Shiratein Shalodom. Shom Hu Nimto, he learned this up in what down in 216, in Likutei Torah, the Alter brings it down. But that's we learn that from the Indian Ashrafim. The Ashrafim are Be'emes in Olam Bria. And yet, nonetheless, it's written dort in the Nevuah from Yeshayahu Hanavi, dort Pashi Yisrael, to say in the Haftarah, you have Ra'ishi as Adni Yeshiv al Kisei v'Asrofim oimdim mimal, Asrofim oimdim mimal. You know, I say everybody's post Purim day, everybody's from Moichem, and Purim is even in the Seiras. And the Etzem, the Alinyonim, is afterwards you fall back into Moichin. Stark, Chofman Bina Das, and others all Inyonim. And others are all around, everybody's from Moichin. It's, why says it, to go up completely beyond Moichin, Adelo Yoda. Once you sort of pull out the carpet from under the Lo Yoda, folk in Yoda, come Tzrik in Moichin. Anyway, whatever. So the question is, what the Baal Shem Tov asked, Rija Adni Yeshiv al Kisei is Malchus Ta'atzilas. Does it mean for Nelakus out Yeshiv al Kisei, or does it mean for Malchus Ta'atzilas out Nasa Mokim? Chitayni is a Malchus auch upon him. And then all of a sudden we see Asrofim Oim Dim Mimal Loya. The Srofim are standing higher than that, and the Srofim they are mekabel from that. We're not the level from Kisei and Adnei Yeshiv al Kisei. There's no Srofim, because the Srofim are B'Elam Abriya, so-called. So how can they be in Elam Abriya and they're standing l'mayla me'ah kol ha'sheira she'aisava shelehem? Doesn't seem to bother anybody to come to Shaila. How can it be as I'm in Tzotach? So the Baal Shem Tov said, those are b'rtein eishel adam shamu onimto. In the Melchizedek time, we don't really want Moshiach. If we really wanted, then we'd be there. Eventually. What is it with time? En het heeft gewoon, het gaat zeker, valt zich erop in de wereld, Olam Kaminoge, Neuer, waar je slept gewoon, je gaat erheen, je gaat erher. Yeah, hoe is het? If we really wanted, then we'd already be there. Man? Well, you must have a koyen. Als je schijnt, du wirst dann die Aveida, das heißt. was a pili place. You should realize that there's a lot to be done. I mean, the matzav is there, man. Do you guys remember Dov Ber Klein? Do you remember Dov Ber Klein? Nobody, you don't remember Dov Ber Klein? Do you remember? Tyler Ingeman, I lived in Manchester. Have you ever been to Manchester? Manchester CV ice. It's cold. I mean, you can't swing the Mezgov either. Mezgov is say cold for quite a bit of the year. But you got all these huge Haredius, Moisdes, you know, they should be gesund, the Chassor, you know, and all sorts of Polishes and Litvaks are in Shir, and all the Frum and all the Chumes, so there's one little fellow there, Dov Ber Klein, that when they made the Isnatkes, you know, they made the Rachmon in Islam. They made this whole thing with Gush Katif. Then when he tried to make a campaign. And he told me all about it. Wow, little fella, Dov Ber Klein. He's Mamishat, he's a Chassidish Chassidish. He's just as our Goyish of Mishachist, or 14, he feels what the Rebbe says. He spread him a fire. Avoid a Neshama, the Dov Ber Klein. So he said he went around in all the shuls and he tried to make a campaign that people should wake up. What's happening out there now? It's outrageous. It's the Pikuach Nefesh. He says, you know, but all these Charedim, they all just told him to get out of the shul. But Mr. Tziyoni, you know, who wants to do with the Tziyoni? Let the Tziyonim do what they want. Number one. Number two, others said to him, no, maybe that's what the Arabs, you have to give them a chance, you know, you have to give the Arabs a chance. Does he give them a chance? They should show what they really got, you know. Who said it's a bad thing? And who said it's wrong? Who should pay us, man? Who should have belt? Packages. He said, it was Pikuach Nefesh, I feel for you. He said, Nefesh for me? I'm sitting there in my... He said, that's the answer he got. And including in Lubavitch Choichasek. Berget in the book. She said, what do we do with that? He spoke to me the other. He said, it's even worse now, 1,000% worse now. So I said, you must go into these shows and tell them that the bombs are going to be falling on Ashdod. And in Ashdod, Lebenshere mention. There's a lot of these former Polishes will say, look, in Ashdod. You know, maybe that'll wake them up. Auf unserer Menschen, das ist auf unserer Menschen verfallen die Bombes. I don't know. Crazy. Now what do we do? I mean, Tweezend to Yidden mit Tweezend über the ganze Welt. If they were all to come with a koyach, you know, with a koyal echo, just imagine what you could achieve. And then ik Speyer is zu allein, daarom Speyer is bij alleen. Speyer is een keer weiter. Tell him. That's just it. So you got to tell him to get around Mordechai Yehudi. That's Mordechai Yehudi. He wasn't popular, all that Mordechai, but at least people had sense to realize that he was the one. And the last Rashi, the Rebbe's got this unbelievable sikh about it. The last Rashi is, well, not the last, it's the second last Rashi. Rashi says that Mordechai was Mishnah Lamelech Achashverosh, and Tzarib them with Portion Memena, Miktas son, the half of the son, they didn't want to have to do with Mordechai anymore. They said, Misbattle mit Talmudai. And ich can Talmud Chacham and say, wie ins. You know, on Dafke Mordechai, he was the one that his word carried Ada Yisrael Bo. He was the Emerson Novi, he was the Emerson Moshiach Shabbatayra. He doesn't go to Chashvel, führt on mit Chashvel. Chashvel is a bottle, but Chashvel is a beetle tear. They try to tell these people. On Shabbos, I told you that on Shabbos I opened my mouth in the shul down there in Chicanary. I really let some of these guys have it. They took it. I was amazed. There was quite a few of them stopped and listened. They usually walk out of the shul. No, they listen. I really let it. I couldn't hold back. I really let it go. I let him have it. And there's quite a few of them. Just at the beginning now to read them. The Imlo Yachshavim Masai. When are they going to wake up? You know, Ad Mosa, the Tadino is gefährlich. And again, he's up the word, and he's up the good word, and he's up the title word. I don't know how we got under that, but maybe just because I would have got under it anyway. I don't know. But anyway, over Brio Shaina Bittel Kamay Batilas. Oh no, we're talking about the Rotten. Should retain the Shalada. Our daughter for the mensch will be Emma's daughter is there. That was in. That's what the Baal Shem Tov learned from them posse. And I remember that she in Brio, yeah. Shaina Bittel Kamay Batilas. I regularly shown Bamir. Of it depends if you're sort of, you know, prepared to put up with that. You say no, we want Achilas. Yeah, v'chein mishmayet me madroya. It goes down from brio to yitzira. V'chein ha'oirois. Yeah, hari kol ha'korev yoisa. L'gabi shelcho ha'mekoiroi. Da'inu b'chinas el yoini shokav. Yoisa hari uba madroya el yoina yoisa. So now we're talking about the yachas of the earth to the kelim. Now we're talking about the iskalas of the earth alidei kelim. The iskalas of the earth b'toich kelim. Now the Rebbe is Mishyachas to the Etzem Musik of the oil. In other words, at the Etzem oil, B'madreya Gavoya Yoisa, it's another type of oil. It's another sug in Gilu oil. Yeah? The higher you are, the more you have a Atzmistika oil, and the more you have Me'ena HaMoya B'Efen Amiti. So therefore, that's the pure, without Kilu the Kelim. V'chein ha'oiloi. Ari kol ha'korev yoisa l'gabi shel she'u mekoiroi. Da'inu, she said yoina shel kav, but a yen shel kav means the first kili of the kav. Yeli achoi tzimtzum arishin. Ari uba madrega yoina yoisa. I brought down when I get to the union from Ak. Yeah, the union of the kav is l'mayla mi Ak. But then this is that's the union from Atika Kloli, or sometimes it's called the union from Atzilus to Klolis. Beginnes ayin madrega el yoina yoisa, or beginnes ayin biyoisa. In other words, that the higher you are in the etzem oyer, then the more the oyer is a state of ayin. That's what we pointed out before. The oyer is in the infant aliyah v'his. Yeah, v'his battlers. The oyer is the infant ayin b'emes ukiyadua. But the meat is in of oil is a inifan lavinun nehoirin. The emes inifan oil is not even maya in the form of oil. No, it's called kaki nehoirin of bittul viskalas betegamok. Bialkein, biachilas, where you have some sort of koyach hamamshich, some sort of koyach which is megala b'cholzois, the inifan the oil maya b'chinas akeser, yeah, b'klal, or b'chinas atik b'frat, and he puts bib. Bipnimius ha'atzilas. Davki bipnimius. Like we said earlier, the mitzad the what the closest union of atzilas is nikva alidei achachma. Kiyadu. Yeah, the iu oirach. We say the iu shema, the iu oirach ha'atzilas. We say in the post chaliyah. I remember the oirach atzilas is shema with the union of chachma. Aber Vivalas Pnimius Abba is the Pnimius Atik. Yeah, the firm Pnimius Atilus, you've got a Gilui Mamish of Atik. Therefore, he's a Rubinus Kesa Baklal, because Kesa is curled with the meaning of Arik also. Remember, the Indian from Chochma being the Indian from Beetle is also Mayadot, the Indian from Arik. But he says, Befrat, the Indian from Atik. In other words, an interesting lesson. Beklal, the Indian from Kesa, Befrat, the Indian from Atik. Because Frat usually puts me down into a more specific Indian. Here, the Frat puts me up into the Ika, what you might call the Ika Hainia. Whatever, Bechinas Atik, Befrat, Bepnimis Atik. Vine, the Klolas are Oirois. The Esser Spheres, the Atilas, Hein, Kemoy, Mitzad Madregas, Akesa, had a good minimum, the Indian from Chok. In other words, that the inyan van oerhoud is an so therefore it's understood why we need a special koyach of Mashiach to be Megala there. And that's regardless of what you call the great achievement of the Kalim, how they are in Hatzilut. The Tzok Kosof, they bring the inyan into some aspect of Gilui, because mitzad the Yemit is inyan van oer, inyan is how he's kolul in the races Hakav. The inyan van Ati. In my Kuntes, that the whole inyan van Atzilus is an amazing, like, two kitzavim. It's like the old Indian in Chassidus, that there's always a paradox, as they say. There's always a paradox. Edify, says the Rebbe, Vahainu, the Klal Chav, Ubiprinus, Madrege, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. Hein Kamoy Mitzad Madreges, Akesa, Viachol. Ubabria, however, once we go down into Oilam Asani Broim, and we go through the whole Indian of Yesh Mi'ayin, and we come into Brio, said by Madreges Abino, he said, over there it's not the Indian from Chokhmah, no, it's the Indian from Bina. In other words, Bina is albeit the beginning of, as the one on the Bina is the Shurish HaIshtausel. So all these Shtausels, Behemoth starts with Bina. Because Bina is already the Indian for the Dargah, how it feels itself already to be part of a Seder. The Ilu Chochmah in is Beetle, even from, how do you say, not just Koyach Ma, but in from Hanochas Atzmusay, the famous lesson that we've had here on certain occasions, they're putting away the self, all that the self is not there. Mashiach Bina, there's already a feeling of how the Indian is Mishyachid, be ourself. That's to say, with Azish Ugeder of a Matthias, and therefore it's the beginning of our Ishtalshalas, and therefore you can go from that to another feeling of Azish Ugeder. And that's Indian for Ishtalshalas. And therefore, since we've already gone into a level where there's already Ayesh, albeit Hascholas Ayesh, I've already come, and therefore it's a Kli only to the Indian from Bina. The Chol only, however, is still a high madrega. The Chol Zeh besitru de kedusha, shehu inyan ha'ayin ve'abitl, al kein kol mashel amayli yoser, habitl yoser. The higher you are and the nearer to the Mokeh, then you got more the Indian from Bitl. Ve'ha'oyer be'yoser, and remember you got the Indian from oyer. In other words, that the more you are close to the Mokeh, to the Moya, then the more you're in a state of Amitius Apitl, because that's what Kedusha is, Be'etzem Apirus, like the Alter brings in Tanya, in Perek Vav, and also later in Perek Kof Aleph, and even in Perek Kof Basis. The whole Inyan from Sitra to Kedusha is the Inyan from Bitl. The higher, and like he brings in the famous Mikdav, but he wrote Bia Baya Mepeterburg in the Geras HaKodesh base. Well, he writes over there the Kol Ma de Kamei Yisa Kaloi. In other words, Kol Kula Kamei Kaloi Chashivei. So the Alter Rebbe Kol Ma She Kamei Yisa Kaloi. The higher you are closer to him, then the more you are in a state of Kaloi. That's the cloud. That's the whole cloud of Sitra de Kedusha. The higher is the more the Bitl, and more the Bitl, the more that there's PMs. The Madrega of the Indian of Gilui, Mitzada Madrega, B'Shleimus Hamur. That Indian comes out. Begilui in the oil. And therefore, the higher you are, more the Gilui of the Moya, Mami. Okay, Kol Masha Mayla Yosa Bitl Yosa Va'erbe Yosa. Kol Masha Yered Mi Madrega La Madrega Mis Mayed. So that's to say how it is Mitzadini from Kedusha. So now we're going to start with the next piece is almost uncomfortable to learn, but what do we, since the Rebbe said it, we have to see it, we have to see it through, as they say, we have to go through it. That's how it is. Mashain came by Klippa, not the case. In the Indian, that Klippa, the Ikra, who Pchinas Yeshes, Vegasus, the whole Indian, the whole, what you might call, the whole, how do you call it, what's the expression I was trying to get at? Anyway, the whole line in Sitra the Sitra de Klippa is the whole holy Kielech, as you might call it. There's an expression in English which I can't sort of lately my mind sort of gets confused with the three Lashonos and sometimes I forget in English what I'm trying to say. But anyway, so the Rebbe says that the whole essence of the ganze definition of Sitra, Achra and Klippa is Yeshes Vegasus. They feel themselves tremendously. So what is the Chiddush? Here we're talking about Eine von Moichen, Eine von Chochma. And Chochma L'chayra is the Bittel. Wherever is Meir, the Emes Eine von Moichen, L'chayra, the Mensch, is he's an honorable, auch upon him, he's not a yes, because he just zeiger to give over the Inyanim Halayah Mitzad the Emes. That's what the Eine von, Ki Emes, how do we say, Hu Elokim Emes? Where's the Eine von Emes? Then the Eine von Moichen give over. Like he brings there in Perek Lamed. In the Agor the Alter Rebbe that Chochma is Echad Ha Emes, the Eine von Emes. So therefore, the Chiddush of that pasuk is that there can be a Eine von a Chocham. In other words, he knows in Yonim from Chochma, but he's a Chocham be'einov. He's also a Chocham in his eyes. Halt Echaz as a Chocham. In other words, not just people of Shabech him as a Chocham, but he's of the opinion in his own eyes that there's Taki a Chocham, also for a Emes a Chocham. Amamir Ra'isi Ish Chocham be'einov. So the Rebbe said, if you fall into a Zamin Matziyah, where you are in your own eyes a Chacham, in other words, you be'emes believe, and you look at yourself and you understand yourself, in your necha, as a Chacham, so then what it really means is that Machzik Atzmei L'Chacham Godel, you're really of the that you're a Chacham Godel, and you hold it for a greater man. In other words, that if you look at yourself in all your inyanim as a Chacham, and you magish the whole union of Chokmoska, even from Regish, we say that that's the way you see yourself, then you're usually not, you don't hold yourself to be just a minor piece. You understand? You hold yourself to be a major machut. In other words, wherever it goes, the union from Machzik Atzmei, Be'ishu union, then it creaks into an exaggeration, into a nipuach. So therefore he said, if already Chacham Ba'eino, said the Rebbe, you can be sure that he holds himself as a Chacham Gadol. Ay, Rabbeinu Shalom. Ukemoi Kain, he said, B'midasa Achesed. Shemag ish piatz me Achesed, she'oise, at she'mispoel eine, he feels the Inyan Achesed. He does the Inyan from Chesed, but he's very, very aware of the fact that he is a Goimel Chesed. And therefore he's always sort of looking to see if the cameras are clicking, and if he's going to have his name in the paper, and if he's going to be mispalsei, and madach, that it should be written on all the columns and all the ceilings and everywhere of the building, whatever he gave the money for, this is ein building. And he gave him v'chuli. And Amir said to Rabbi, he's magish, achesed she'oiz, at she'mispoer, he becomes splendified, mitzad the union that he gave. Or Mikol Shekain, and we see that Mikol Shekain now is an interesting one. You might have thought the Kol Shekain is the Gabi himself. So he said, no, the Kol Shekain really works the other way. The Mikol Shekain, the Mekabu Chazdei, to the one who's receiving it, he always keeps reminding him the whole time. He says to him, Riyei kama toiva gamalticha. Oh, you see how much I've done for you. Oh, you don't realize all I've done for you. Oh, I've given myself for you. Oh, I've given away for you. Where are you? Where's the Kodesh HaToiv? Where's all the, the gratitude and all the, the other inyanim? Where's all the, COVID and all the other things that are due to me? You don't realize all I've done. What a thought. So really what happens is that the the person who benefited from his benefaction becomes a sufferer. The person who benefited from him, and the whole time he's got to keep reminding him and doing for him. And every now and then he says to him, "What I did for him, where are you? You know? Where's the recognition of my good deeds?" So we see that's a koshke. You know, the Makabel really puts up more than what the newspapers do, because the newspaper, everything they're supposed to show that he wants a bit of notice and appeal some. But the ones who are really Makabel, he never lets them forget it for a minute, as you say. Kamoi kol tivu di avdin legamayu avdin. That's what the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe brings at the end of Perek Aleph that is the problem with Klal HaKlippos. That's a huge Masechta to deal with that whole Inyan. But you know very well the famous Inyan of it, that's a Gemara. The Masechta Bava Basra, not far from the beginning in the Masechta, not huge. I told this to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He asked his Talmidim, what did they say about the Pasuk, Chesed liyumim chatos. Chesed liyumim chatos. There's all sorts of biurim over there, that even though they did a chesed, it's a sin, and this, and all sorts of biurim. Coming again to two, I think it is, but they border a little bit on this biur, and then I think it was, who was it? Anyway, I can't remember. He says the pshat that kol tivu the avdi the gamayu aim avdi. In other words, it's not a chat, it's not a sin. It's a mamish sin, but it's like a pagia in the etzeminian of Elikus. That there was like a sin, like Avi the Eibishter, because they do it for themselves. In other words, that they want to feel good. They want to feel good for them. And I'm going to say, why are you helping the other person? Because you want to feel good in this world, and therefore you have to help the other person. But Gamayu Haim Avdi. That's a much more delicate and tifa inya.
Because that's in Netanya Kedei L'Shiaher.
Huh? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's two inyonim, two days, and that's one day, and this is the other. The one Shaya is the one that the Alter Rebbe brings. So there's two Rishonos in the Gemara. And now the Alter Rebbe says that he's tifa. The Alter Rebbe says that he not only wants to feel good, but he wants to be be'enei atzmi, how do you call it, Adam Gadol, or Kilo or Kompanyin from Gadlos. Like I said, it's a huge pilfer in Tanya. Was will the Alter Rebbe what's he being Maram is it's not a shir in Tanya of the Regis. What you might call the neshama or the nefesh of the Inyan, what the Alter Rebbe brings is that day. The Inyan, the close kavana to it, it's all Perek Aleph, is gamayu. They really mean zichalim. That's not a shlila that they don't do chesed. Nobody says they never call tivu the avdin. They take it do good. They do good things. That's the whole question. Call tivu the avdin legamayu. They don't really do it for the makabel. They don't really do it mitzad mitis akavana. Mitzad paradasi the inyan was mitafto. They do it that they should feel benefited from. And Derech Hagav, the way that he wants to feel benefaction, fazich, is that the others also going to be makabel. Mechesed Shabbat. Remember, said the Rebbe, that's a close Ainin, how it is mitzad the Klippos, the Kol Mada Tivu, the Avdin, the Gamayu Avdin. In other words, it's Taketivu. V'alkein, Kol Mashal Amayla Yesa, Aklipa B'chinas Chalishas. The Maila meaning closer to the elements of Kedusha, Lafisha Meir Shom Ur Kedusha B'Yez. In other words, basically, it's the same basic principle all the way through. Just like we saw in the elements, the Kedusha. Where the Ur is Meir, Imamela, that's Mitzad the Inyan from Beetle, Mitzad the Etzem what you might call Mailisha Bailamahu, that's why the air is made. So Klippa Seichasai. Since the Klippa is a dying duck in Bailamahu, therefore the air is able to get through more. There's more in him. The Klippa is more Kali to Eideshu Ha'ora. And therefore he said that it's in even that it's still a dying in a infant darkness. Beginnes Kalisha. Meaning the Indian from the Tzilas the Kedusha, the Klippa, the Era Kedusha, who betoikiv ein mokim leyeshes lagasas a Klippa kolkach. Yeah, since the Era over there is betoikiv, then it's not mokim that gives it kolkach. Because like we saw, there is a certain mokim, but that's the Heragish Abitel. In other words, there's still Emerson Beetle there. But the Beetle is already in the beginning of a Heragish. And Shabasiya, Shosham ha'er the Kedusha b'miyud b'yoysa, Shom is Gabas HaKlippa Yoysa, Bepinas Atik de Klippa Akamoi Benefesh, Ari Tukva de Nishmasa, Chulsha de Gufa. That if there's a Tukva de Nishmasa, Chulsha de Gufa, Vasibas Tukva de Gufa, Umi Chulsha de Nishmasa. In other words, where the Oyer HaKedush is already mismayet, Ad Kedit Kakten, the Inikan, von Tukva de Gufa. However, the Kasha HaKoyches, the Nefesh HaLekisa, im Bizgalas, Misbatlim HaKoyches Nefesh HaBami Shanazim, B'chinas Chalishes. V'gam Misbarim, U'Mistachnim, Al Yedei HaAvayda. But we'll see that the Sibba, the Teichev, and the Klippus is Heder Avayda. Heder Avayda. That's the principle. The principle is, wherever there's Meir, Kedusha, then there must be a beetle. It's just a question of how much beetle. But so close if it's a beetle, and it's a beetle, Alidei beetle say, Meir, Aini van Oyer Amiti. It could be Chalises, Lafira, once you got into the Tzaddik Klippas, then it's not Meir, the Amiti Sinyan Oyer Yoter, it's only Meir, how the Klippa, as you might call it, translates the Indian of the oil. In the middle where everything is still bedachis, it translates it into its own self, for its own, how you might call Hereg Shabitel. As you go further down, then the whole thing becomes lost, and then it becomes Tukva de Gufa. Alba, the Indian Aveda, so what does it mean by Aveda? What he means, Aveda means that the man should some live ala emes, he's mishtalo. And he makes an effort the whole time to be aware of what's tutzcha arum, what is happening with him. You see, Efahu, Ba'elam. Und der Ikea, yesh leima, der Indian is nimshach, b'chol der v'doyer, b'chol zman. Al yedei the nosi from dem zman, al yedei the emes novi, the emes nosi, b'zman ahu, al yedei ze, meye Indian ze, ad kama, he can be poor by zik the gilo mamera the khusha the guf mamera the khusha ko aynon van nefesh ba'amiyas that comes all the day the gilo from the that's nimshach through the emsa kasha yoni moisha yode the gover Israel. I said these covers from Moisha, like we spoke in the Farbrengen. Probably you guys are so familiar and you don't remember we had a Farbrengen. But that's what we spoke about during the Farbrengen. It's all Nimshach Alidei Oyer Kasher Yoni Moishe Moishe Yoder. Yes, the Lahamich Binyan Ze Laharchiv. It's a beer Binyan Ze Oen Kana Mochem Yet the Rega Ze. We already marked the beer in the Farbrengen a little bit. But everything's Nimshach Alidei. We have to be miskasher, mistabik in the words of the Rebbe, not what people tell us that the Rebbe says. I heard an amazing thing that I heard from Einam. He said, God, Nishka, Laptavki is a mishchest. Laptavki is a mishchest. But he said he spoke with somebody the other day, the first day of Purim in Yerushalayim, he spoke with this person said, the truth is, I don't really know if I'm a mishchest. He said, but I prefer to be in the company of mishchest. That's what he said. So this person said, he said, well, you know, what? He said, push it to a positive, you know, to full of light, you know, it's cocked, my head to run, you know, we heard, but he said, these other people are sullen and unpleasant. And that's not right. I mean, that's what he meant. I don't mean that, God forbid, as a pagia in anybody's COVID, chas v'sholem. I don't mean that, oh, Anshi Shlamena, Kula Mahuvim, Kula Marim, but I mean, he's got a point. Yeah, sprint. It's sprint with the brain. And I mean, that's in the good. We have to listen to the Rabbi. That's, you know, what says. Every day, which you listen to the Rabbi and you go only according to his club. Well, that's how everybody did. Took for the good hand, and in the meantime, it all moves forward. You know, the bombs keep coming. It's totally over. And that's what I did. I saw these people on Shabbos, these privileges. Jose Kitsin, they listened to me in a way I've never seen it before. They were most listening to see what would be the next few sentences. Oh, they started looking at this thing, I look at it, but they thought really interested in that thing. Also, I said, because Achmoni Natan, the Matzah is a big time. Happen by the Tutsacha, Aro, what is really happening? And Mordechai Yehudi, that's so amazing. When you think about it, the Rebbe Rashab, he called a meeting about the matzah from the Yidden and the Japanese Russian war, and he called the Rogachover to the meeting. The Rogachover said that he can't come because he can't afford to be misbattled. I can't understand. He can't come to a meeting, but he agrees with everything that's in it. So the Rebbe said that he's right. He said if anybody else said that, he wouldn't be makabel. He said the Rogachover meant us. He means it with Emes and Mel from him. I'm makabel. Anybody else said I wouldn't be makabel. Oh, but who made the meeting? Where did you make the meeting? Who gave away his time? The Rebbe Rashab. Hours and hours of his time. I heard from Rav Lander, the Rebbe used to devote hours. The same person that said all this gave away hours and hours of his time. But this is Mordechai Yehudi. Mordechai didn't care. The Ike is a Dav Zayin Kavona Aliyena Lamata. My time will go. Check. What's coming to? And there were some of the senators and wait a minute, what's going to be with Alonim and teach Boshim my money? And he said, of a so when it needed the tachlis, they had to come to Mordechai and frag him, what's on the net on Mordechai? So what's happening yet? מה צריכים עכשיו לעשות? אמן, יחי אבינו רבנו רבנו